Okay, this is Chem 1115, experiment number 6. This is a lab that's centered around oxygen. We'll be investigating some of the reactions that oxygen has. The first thing we need to do in this lab is we need to generate our oxygen. To do this, we're going to use some hydrogen peroxide. This is just 3% hydrogen peroxide from the drugstore. And we need to have something break this hydrogen peroxide down into the oxygen gas that we're needing to get from it. And to do that, we're just going to use some active dry yeast. This is just like when you put hydrogen peroxide on a cut, it bubbles up. Those bubbles that are forming, that's actually oxygen gas. So we're basically just doing that same reaction here. The way we'll be doing this is we'll be taking these two reagents and combining them in a 500 milliliter Erlenmeyer flask that has a side tube here. So we're going to put a thistle tube, onto our Erlenmeyer flask. That's going to plug up this, so the only thing that can get in is our hydrogen peroxide, and it will react with our yeast mix down here. The oxygen will bubble and escape through this tube. Now, to capture that oxygen, we're going to make use of a pneumatic trough. So this will be filled with water, and into this water we will submerge several bottles. You see I've filled them to the brim with water. And so they will be submerged in this trough, and there will be water just about up to here. You see there's a little water inlet hole here. So we'll fill this up, and the tube from our oxygen generator will hook up into this little spout here, like so. And then that will pipe the oxygen gas through this hole, and we will invert these bottles upside down so they begin capturing the oxygen bubbles that form. And as that oxygen begins filling up our bottle, it'll displace the water, and eventually we'll have bottles filled with just oxygen gas. So let's get that started. Okay, now that we've filled up our pneumatic trough, we're going to get our yeast and into our oxygen generator here. So we're only going to use a small amount of yeast. We don't need very much. So I'm just going to keep this hose on here because if I let it off, it's going to start draining water. But I will add the yeast over. And then we're going to add about 25 mils of just tap water. And just stir that around so it gets nice and slurry. Okay. Now we'll put the thistle tube back on here and move this over here. Next thing we need to do is get our first bottle ready to collect the gas. So your procedure says that you should collect the first bottle of gas and use it as oxygen, but there's going to be a whole lot of air in this bottle that needs to be displaced first. So we're going to use this first bottle, which I've labeled air, to try to capture all of that. And to do that, we're just going to put a glass cover over the top, invert this, put it in the water, and then we'll slide it over that hole that our tube here is connected to. And now all we have to do is begin generating our oxygen. So the oxygen will first displace all the air that's in here. We'll fill this bottle up, and then we'll move on to the next square bottle, which I've labeled 1. And we will collect all of these until we've collected up to 4 bottles of oxygen. So let's start that now. So it looks like we probably didn't use enough yeast here. So we're just going to unstopper this. We'll leave the air container where it's at. We're going to unstopper this, pour out our contents, and start over. Okay, so I've got some more yeast in here. It's quite a bit more. It's quite a bit thicker than it was before. So hopefully we shouldn't run into a low gas generation problem like we just did. I'm also going to take this chance to get the rest of our bottles into our trough. So here's bottle number 1. So there's all 4 bottles. Let's start adding our hydrogen peroxide. Okay, that looks good. So we're going to swap out our bottles. This bottle is just empty now, so we're going to put it to the side. We will use this again later. All right, so that's full. I'm going to swap out the bottles. Now to get this bottle out, all we're going to have to do is take one of our glass covers here, put it under the water, and just lift this up. Yeah, it doesn't look like we quite got all the water out, but that's okay. So we'll just put that cover on. And now we have a glass that has mostly oxygen in it. And we'll just put that to the side. The bottle is full because we're starting to get bubbles come out the side of the bottle. So now we know to switch. And this is our last bottle. So after this is done, we will start our experiments.